Sup you beautiful people. Hope you've had a fantastic day. Welcome to part 1 of What If Deku Was the Sun Hero. If you guys enjoy this what if, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel after watching this video. Before we get into it though, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. Are you sure? Midoriya Hisashi questioned the doctor sitting across from his family. Next to him his wife, Inko, and their son, Izuku, were sad. Inko looked shocked while Izuku was practically vibrating with happiness. The doctor nodded to the father's question before handing him the paper with Izuku's quirk detection test on it. We've redone the test 3 times, just to be sure. The doctor assured the parents. Little Izuku has 2 quirks. Both a mutant type and an emitter type, and both are very powerful. Izuku's little face practically lit up the room with his smile, as he looked on with wide, happy eyes. So he's not just pyrokinetic. Hisashi questioned since Izuku's starting a fire out of nowhere was what had brought them to the doctor's office in the first place. No, it would seem that he was born with a hybridization of you and your wife's quirks. But also a rare random mutation quirk that sometimes shows up in a child that has nothing to do with either parent's quirk. The doctor explained as he pointed to a spot on the paper, drawing both parents' eyes to it. This indicates the presence of a mutant-type quirk, and by comparing it to previous records, it seems to be a body enhancement quirk. Having 2 quirks is rare, isn't it? Inko questioned as she hugged her beaming child. It won't hurt Izuku, will it? He may have some trouble controlling both of them at the same time for a while. But Izuku should get used to them both after enough practice. The doctor reassured the worried mother. What I found to be interesting is that Izuku's quirks share a link with each other. His pyrokinesis can fuel his body enhancement, and his body enhancement can help strengthen his pyrokinetic abilities. It's quite the fascinating development to see 2 different types of quirks working together in one person. Should we fill out 2 quirk registries for Izuku then? Hisashi asked, and the doctor thought for a few moments. You can hold off on filling out a quirk registry for 1 year after a child's quirk manifests to give it some time to develop and get a more accurate idea of what it can do. The doctor informed the parents. I'd suggest doing that in this case, because his 2 quirks are technically linked and may be able to be registered as a single quirk once they fully manifest. Thank you for your time, doctor. Inko and Hisashi bowed, copied by Izuku, before they stood and left the office with an ecstatic 4-year-old. The following Monday morning Izuku was dropped off at preschool and was excited to show off his quirk to Koch-chan. The green-haired boy instantly sought out his ash-blonde friend and made his way over to him. Koch-chan, I got my quirks, Izuku announced excitedly. Katsuki looked confused by the plural and questioned it. What do you mean quirks? Katsuki asked. People have a quirk, Izuku, not quirks. The doctor said I have 2. Izuku smiled widely. Oh yeah? Katsuki questioned before smirking. Let's see them then. Okay. Izuku smiled before he produced a small flame in his palm. Katsuki wasn't very impressed, but the rest of the class, including the teachers, all smiled and congratulated Izuku on his quirk. So what's the second quirk? Katsuki inquired, and the flame in Izuku's hand died out as he scrunched up his face and grew slightly taller, while his musculature became bulkier and more pronounced. It wasn't a crazy increase in height or size, but he was clearly bulkier than he was a second ago. See? I told you I have 2. Izuku smiled as he deflated back to his normal 4-year-old body. Can't you use them at the same time? Katsuki wondered and Izuku shook his head. It's really hard. Izuku replied. I can only use one or the other right now. That's weird, Katsuki shrugged. If you can't use them both at the same time, aren't you not using them right? I don't know, Izuku's smile fell a bit as he thought about it. Geez, Izuku, even when you get your quirk you can't do it right. Katsuki laughed and Izuku's face turned red in embarrassment. I'll figure it out. Izuku responded. The doctor said so. If you say so. Katsuki dismissed. Mine's still better. He grinned as he set off a series of pops with his explosion quirk. For the next year Izuku kept trying to use his quirks properly. The 2 being linked made it difficult to get a grasp on using them both instead of one or the other. Sometimes Izuku would bulk up, but no fire would form. Other times it was the opposite with a burst of fire, but his body staying the same. Working hard, Izu. Hisashi smiled at his son as the Midoriya family was at a quirk training center, a place where people could go to legally use their quirks, so that they could learn to control them. A good half of most of these types of facilities were set up for children to use as it was imperative that they learn to control their quirks after they manifested. Yeah? Izuku replied. I'm going to learn to use my quirks and become a hero. The green-haired boy cheered and both of his parents laughed at his exuberance. Ever since he'd watched All Might's debut video online, their son had decided he wanted to be a hero when he grew up. The fact that All Might had a quirk that seemed similar to Izuku's only made the young boy more determined. We know you will, Izuku, we're so proud of you, baby. Inko encouraged her son while Hisashi smiled proudly at his little man. Izuku beamed at his parents as he worked to control both of his quirks. Upon leaving the facility an hour later with a tired Izuku, the Midoriyas took the train back to their apartment. Izuku, in Inko's arms, smiled as he watched the world go by through the window. The sun shining down on the world made Izuku grin as he watched. By the time the family returned home, Izuku was full of energy and completely refreshed from his practice at the center. To be young again, Hisashi sighed fondly as he watched his son already filled with energy again. Inko nodded as she leaned her head on his shoulder and watched her baby pull out some toys to play with. A month later. Get out of my way, Deku. Bakugo growled as an explosion rang out across the playground. Izuku still didn't understand why Koch-chan insisted on calling him that these past few months. Sure, he still couldn't use his dual quirk properly, but that didn't mean he was useless. That's enough, Koch-chan. You already made him cry. Izuku yelled back, his arms scuffed up, but otherwise uninjured from the blast the ash-blonde 5-year-old had hit him with. You think you can be a hero with your quirks? Bakugo demanded as his hands popped with mini explosions. Behind him, his two lackeys used their quirks, wings and extendable fingers, to try and intimidate him. Heroes don't hurt others, Koch-chan. Izuku stated resolutely. Bakugo scat at the green-haired boy. Just because you have two quirks doesn't mean you can be a hero. Bakugo snapped back. You can't even use them both properly. But I can use mine fully. Face a Deku, my quirk is better than yours. Behind Bakugo, his lackeys both burst into laughter at Izuku. The boy that the green-haired 5-year-old had been protecting had already fled without any of them really noticing. Izuku knew he could be a hero, his mother and father had both said so. Both of his parents had told them how proud they were of him, ever since he'd learned about his two quirks. He was proud of himself. Hey, is it getting hotter? Extendable Fingers lackey asked Wings and Bakugo. Yeah, it is, but why? Wings questioned. Only Bakugo quickly discerned the reason, since he knew what one of Izuku's quirks was. Hey Deku, stop trying to use your. Bakugo trailed off as he stared at Deku. All three of the boys learned two things then and there on that playground. First, what happens when you insult and demean someone's pride. Second, what it felt like to be under the gaze of someone far stronger than them. I can't be a hero. Who decided that? Izuku asked as heat waves were coming off of his body. The same body that was growing taller and packing on muscle at an astounding pace. Deku, Bakugo forced out, hating himself for stuttering. Your quirk is better than mine. Who decided that? Izuku intoned as he now stood at double his original height. The heat that was pouring off his body caused a large heat haze to surround the 5-year-old, though he certainly didn't look like a 5-year-old anymore. I will be the one to decide. Izuku stared down his three bullies, looking down on the three other boys from his new superior height. All three boys bolted away from Izuku and didn't stop running until they'd left the playground completely. This was the day that Bakugo Katsuki learned fear for the first time. It was also the day that began his complete dislike of his once friend. A seething feeling of anger, fear, and inferiority developed in the ash blonde that he would struggle with for years to come. For Izuku, he suddenly realized that he was using both his quirks at the same time. I did it, I did it. Izuku cheered as he threw his hands up and made his way back to his home just across the street from the playground. He took the stairs 3 at a time with his current size, and was soon standing in front of his door. Opening it quickly, he kicked off his shoes in the entryway, and rushed into the kitchen where his parents were. Needless to say, both Midoriyas were shocked at this boy suddenly being in their home. But one look at his face and both parents knew this was their son. Izuku? Inko questioned, her face set in a worried look. Mom, Dad, I did it. I'm using both my quirks at the same time. Izuku smiled and Hisashi smiled happily at his son. That's great, Izu. Hisashi congratulated. But could you turn down the temperature a little? He asked with a chuckle. Izuku looked sheepish for a moment, just now noticing that his parents were both sweating from his heat, and quickly shrank back down to his normal size. Sorry. Izuku apologized and Inko moved forward to hug him, while reassuring him it was okay. Izuku smiled happily at finally making progress with his quirk. Another month later of Izuku practicing and testing out his full quirk led the family to discovering that his quirks were easier to use during the day, especially if it was sunny outside. This had prompted a trip to the doctor's and another interesting discussion. Doctor's office. So Izuku's ability is stronger when it's sunny. The doctor asked for confirmation before getting nods from all three Midoriyas. I'm not all that surprised. Most pyrokinetics say they feel their quirk is stronger during the daytime, especially on a sunny day. Though we're not quite sure why that is, to be honest. So it's normal then? Inko asked and the doctor nodded. A very common trait among fire-based quirks. The doctor assured her. Now that Izuku has a handle on his power, did you want to register it today? The doctor asked and both parents looked at their 5-year-old son. What do you think, Izu? Hisashi asked his boy. Can I name it? Izuku asked with his green eyes shining. Of course you can, baby. Inko instantly agreed as she hugged her baby. I want to call it the sun. Izuku exclaimed, his fists raised high. Both Hisashi and the doctor chuckled at the 5-year-old, but the doctor turned to his computer and started filling in the quirk registry. Is this because you can make fireballs now? Hisashi teased his son, making Izuku turn red in the cheeks. It's cause the sun helps my quirk, Dad. Izuku replied with a small pout. Inko kissed the top of his head, while Izuku held out his hands and brought a baseball-sized fireball into existence between them. But they do look like the sun. He smiled as both his parents agreed with him as they looked at the red-orange ball of flames. The Midoriya family left the doctor's office that day, with plans to celebrate with ice cream, along with a copy of Izuku's brand new quirk registry. Name: Midoriya Izuku. Quirk: the sun. Type: hybrid, mutant/emitter. Registry: Izuku would spend the rest of his elementary school years training his quirk. He was often praised, alongside Katsuki, for his powerful quirk and his desire to be a hero. Everybody believed that Izuku was going to make a great hero in the future, and the green-haired boy tried to humbly accept the praise like his parents told him to. It was the realization in the last year of elementary school that Izuku became rather confident when he used his quirk for extended periods of time. That had prompted another visit to the doctor. Thankfully, the doctor had been able to quickly figure out that Izuku's body enhancement also increased the amount of hormones his brain released. With the extra dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, and testosterone in his system, it was natural for him to become confident and self-assured until he powered down. First year of junior high, second semester. Did you hear about the new transfer? A student a row over from Izuku whispered to his friend during lunch. The blonde girl, Toga I think her name is. His friend whispered back. Yeah, I heard she was from a pretty wealthy family. The first boy quietly spoke. Then why is she at a public junior high like Aldair? The second student questioned in a hushed tone. I heard she's a violent weirdo that attacked another student at her old school. The first student said. I could see it. The second boy nodded. Have you seen her eyes? She's got those cat-like eyes that look at you like something to play with. He shivered at the memory. Where is she anyway? The first boy questioned. She left right as lunch started. The second student responded. Hopefully she's not hurting anybody. How crude, talking about someone behind their back. Izuku admonished both of the boys as he stood up from his desk and left the room. Both boys shrank back from the green-haired boy. No one wanted to potentially anger the normally kind Midoriya. They'd all seen what he was capable of in PE during the quirk application course. Where would I go if I was a new student and didn't want to be near anyone talking bad about me? Izuku pondered as he walked before noticing the sign for the stairs that led to the rooftop. Good a chance as any. He nodded as he made his way up the stairs. Opening the door to the rooftop, he stepped out into the sunlight and smiled. The sun had always made him smile, and he always felt full of energy when bathed in its rays. Looking around, he saw the new girl, Toga, huddled in the shade of the stairwell wall. Go away. Toga muttered dully. The blonde was clearly not in the mood to deal with people. It would be rude of me to leave you by yourself. Izuku replied as he walked closer before stopping a few meters from the girl. At back, Toga trailed off as Izuku noticed she was gripping her arms tightly. A look into her eyes showed a storm of emotions behind the yellow cat-like eyes. I want, she mumbled to herself while gazing at him unsettlingly. Are you alright? Izuku asked, now worried the girl might be having some kind of fit or possibly a panic attack. I want. Toga stared at him, her gaze getting darker for lack of a better term. What do you want? Izuku asked, fully prepared to get the girl whatever she needed to help with this attack. Blood. Toga yelled as she leapt forward and swung at Izuku with her nails. Very sharp nails that had been filed to a point, Izuku noticed. The green-haired boy felt his quirk surge through him as he bulked up, and heat began to emanate from his body. He quickly caught the blonde girl's wrists and looked into her distressed face. Calm down, Toga. Izuku firmly requested of the girl he now towered over. Seeing the blonde looking frantic, as well as feeling the kicks to his legs, if only barely, he spoke again. Why are you acting this way? My quirk, blood, I need. Toga was obviously trying to communicate, but having difficulty because of her fit. Your quirk is making you act this way. Izuku wanted to confirm, getting a shaky nod from the writhing blonde. With a nod of his head, Izuku touched his thumb to the sharp nail of Toga's thumb, hard enough to draw some blood. Blood. Toga's eyes zeroed in on the red liquid as Izuku let her wrists go and held out his bleeding thumb. If blood is what you need, then here. Izuku smiled down at the blonde girl who didn't hesitate to literally put Izuku's thumb in her mouth and start licking and sucking on it. This seems almost erotic. The green-haired boy thought to himself as his cheeks turned a bit red. After a few seconds, Toga's eyes cleared up and she snapped them wide open. How? I've never, from so little, impossible. Toga tried to form words, but appeared too stunned to do so. Izuku tilted his head curiously as the blonde pulled his thumb from her mouth. She still lapped at it every time the blood beaded up again, but her eyes were sharp and clear of the haze they seemed to have been in when Izuku found her. Are you better now, Toga? Izuku questioned and the blonde girl nodded to him. Thank you, Midoriya, right? Toga asked for confirmation. Izuku nodded with a smile, and Toga continued. My quirk needs blood to activate. So sometimes I get this really strong desire to acquire blood. When I ignore it for too long, well, here she motioned to the rooftop to indicate the altercation they just had. A quick side effect then? Izuku asked and Toga nodded. Well, I'm glad I could help you out. He smiled at the girl. I've never been able to come out of the fit with so little blood before though. Toga admitted while licking his thumb again. Your blood is amazing. It's so rich, sweet, powerful. I don't know how to describe it. But I don't feel like I want blood at all now. Usually I need more before I'm even close to back to normal. How often do these fits happen? Izuku asked as he sat down with his back against the stairwell wall. Toga followed him quickly, keeping his hand with the bleeding thumb in her grip. They've been happening more often as I get older. Toga answered. The doctors my parents took me to said it was because my quirk was naturally growing stronger. Usually even after I come out of a fit, there's still this little feeling in the back of my mind that wants to find more blood. But just this little bit of yours. Toga paused to lick another bead of blood from his thumb. And even that little feeling is completely gone. I'd be happy to help you out if I can. Izuku offered, another warm smile on his face. Toga suddenly felt her heart thump in her chest. She liked that smile. Really liked it. It felt warmer than even the sunlight on her skin right now. You would? Really? Toga questioned and Izuku nodded, his smile still warming her from the inside out. Thank you, Midoriya. Maybe I can finally have a normal school year for the first time since 4th grade. Don't mention it, Toga. Izuku grinned as he forced the red from his cheeks when Toga licked his thumb again. So, what do you want to do when you grow up, Midoriya? Toga questioned and Izuku practically glowed when he started talking about his dream to be a hero that saved people with a smile. Toga felt so warm talking with Izuku like this. Hearing about his dream and passion to be a hero just made her want to smile. So, what's your quirk, Toga? I just realized I didn't ask about it. Izuku smiled as he took out a notebook from somewhere and looked poised to take notes. You're a quirk nerd too? Toga giggled and Izuku chuckled as he shrank back down to his normal size. The danger had clearly passed, and his thumb had already healed. Now was the time to learn about another interesting quirk. I suppose you could say that. Izuku admitted with a grin. The two spent the rest of lunch chatting and seeing Izuku go wide-eyed when she told him about her quirk absolutely made Toga's day. The Kyoei, his face turned completely red when she mentioned the naked part of her quirk, sent her into full-on laughter as Izuku blushed and stammered. The two quickly became friends before lunch was even over, and, unbeknownst to Izuku, he was Toga's first friend since her quirk manifested its side effect when she was 5. Some might say this day was also the first step for the man that would come to be known as the proud hero. Eskiner. For even though he didn't know it, this was the very first time he ever saved someone. Though the girl that he saved would always know and would never forget it. 2nd year of junior high. Thanks for agreeing to help me out, Izuku. Toga smiled as she stretched and limbered up. It's no problem, Toga. Izuku smiled at the girl. He and Toga had been friends for months now. Apparently hearing him talk about being a hero so passionately had inspired Toga to try as well. The blonde girl had confided in Izuku that aside from him, every person she'd met had thought a quirk was creepy or villainous. But after listening to Izuku, with his encouragement and belief that a quirk could be great for heroics, Toga is determined to prove all of those people wrong. She'd be a hero, she'd help people with her creepy and villainous quirk. Are you ready? Toga questioned as she withdrew some wooden training knives she'd ordered off the internet. She needed blood for her quirk to work, so using a bladed weapon made sense. Plus she was always rather limber and agile, so the lightweight weapons would complement that. Anytime. Izuku nodded and Toga dashed forward. Izuku bulked up and his body began to produce heat as Toga quickly closed the distance. The first strike came, a stab, which Izuku sidestepped to avoid. Toga swung the other knife towards his stomach, and Izuku took a large step back. You're pretty fast, Toga. He complimented the blonde who only grinned at him. For such a big guy you're fast too. Toga giggled as she threw one of the wooden training knives. Izuku moved aside to dodge, and Toga was suddenly inside his reach preparing to stab him in the side. Izuku grabbed the hand with the knife and stopped it dead with his far superior strength. Without any strain Izuku pushed Toga back, and the blonde went flying backwards several meters before her feet touched the ground. Whoa. You're even stronger than I thought, Izuku. Toga smiled at him as she got her footing back. How'd you sneak up like that? Izuku questioned curiously. I dodged the throw knife and then you were already in my guard. People lose track of things around them when they focus on a single object. Toga grinned at him. Your vision focused on the knife coming at you, and you lost track of me. It's called tricking the eye. Magicians and ninja use it to pull off sneaky stuff. Ha, that's neat. Izuku nodded with a thoughtful look on his face. You ready to continue? Sure thing. Toga grinned and she picked up her other wooden training knife, and the two started again. 2nd year of junior high summer break. Would we come to this place to practice? Toga asked Izuku as they stood in front of a large facility with a high wall surrounding a large amount of land. Because this place allows full quirk use on their large fields. Izuku informed the blonde. You did say you wanted to see more of the pyrokinetic side of my quirk, right, boo? I get to see that today. Toga practically started bouncing in excitement. She'd been so curious about Izuku's pyrokinetic abilities. But regulations on pyrokinetic quirks were strict for obvious reasons, so she hadn't been able to see much. The two quickly rented a large rocky field for an hour, and once they arrived Izuku immediately bulked up. Make sure you stay back a bit, Toga. Izuku advised the blonde. My flames are really hot, and even the heat they put off can cause first-degree burns if you're too close. I'm back. Toga grinned as she skipped off to the side and watched as Izuku was covered in a heat haze. Fire whipped up around the large muscular form of her green-haired friend. Toga smiled widely at finally seeing Izuku's pyrokinetic ability in full for the first time. He wasn't kidding about the heat though. She could feel it from where she stood dozens of meters away. Gentle son. Izuku spoke and a ball of flames appeared above his palm. The bright yellow-orange flames swirled around, and Toga marveled at the ease of control. With a motion of his arm, Izuku sent the ball of fire flying towards a large rock on the field. There was a blast of flames, larger than Toga expected, and when the fire dispersed the rock was scorched black. That was cool, Izuku. Toga cheered as she waved her arms excitedly. Hahaha, I'm glad you think so, Toga. Izuku chuckled at her mirth, his voice having a noticeable change in depth. Izuku was normally a tenor in voice type. But when he bulked up and used his quirk, his voice got deeper and became a baritone voice type. Toga hadn't told Izuku, but she found his voice appealing in both forms. Can you do more? Toga asked with a wide smile. Of course, this is merely a sample of my power, Izuku proclaimed. The lowest and the most gentle of my named attacks. With that he held up his right hand, palm facing the sky, and a massive ball of flames swirled forth. Toga actually craned her neck to see the top. The heat had jumped considerably, and even as far away as she was still sweating in a matter of seconds. This is midday sun. It's an area of effect move that superheats the surroundings and forces villains to surrender as they succumb to the heat. I could see it. Toga agreed as she fanned her face with her hands. She was still further away as she had been, and she had sweat running down her already. She couldn't imagine how hot it must be directly beside the massive ball of flames. Izuku continued to demonstrate his pyrokinetic control, and some different variations of his attacks for Toga. The blonde was mesmerized by how much work Izuku had put into his quirk over the years. This wasn't the level of control that someone just had. This was clearly the result of years of dedication to practice and refining his quirk. Toga truly admired Izuku's drive to be a hero. That the green-haired boy put everything he had into his dream was inspiring. She also found it attractive like nobody's business. She was most definitely crushing on her friend. Our time is almost up, Toga. Izuku informed her as he looked towards the large digital clock on the side of the facility facing the field they were in. Would you like to see anything else before we leave? A big attack, Izuku. Toga cheered. A really big one. A big attack you say? Izuku grinned with a proud look on his face. Very well. Izuku leapt up into the air with his enhanced body, easily clearing 20 meters, before calling forth another ball of fire. This ball was different than the gentle sun he'd shown at the beginning. The center of the ball was a bright white, and the flames almost seemed to be compressed into a smaller space. Izuku held the compressed ball of fire above his palm, as he took aim at a large pile of stones at the end of the field. Cruel son. The verdette intoned as he launched the ball at the rocks. Toga watched on as the ball smashed into the rock pile at speed. The resulting blast almost knocked her off her feet from the shockwave. Toga trailed off as she spotted the remains of the large pile of stone. The entire area that had once been littered with large rocks and boulders had been half melted into molten rock. The hot liquefied stone poured down the remaining surface of the largest rocks to form a large pool of lava on the ground around them. Seems I still have a ways to go. Izuku mused as he looked at his handiwork. I meant to melt them all in one shot. Izuku, that was crazy awesome. Toga cheered as Izuku walked towards her and shrank down to his normal state. Thanks, Toga, I appreciate it. Izuku smiled kindly at the blonde as he stood before her. I didn't know you had that much power. The excited blonde gushed as they walked back towards the facility. What kind of villain could stand up to that? Hopefully not many. Izuku rubbed the back of his head. Potentially a powerful pyrokinetic villain, or maybe one that had some kind of incredible fire resistance as a side benefit of their own quirk. But their quirk would probably be, the verdette started to mutter and mumble, and Toga couldn't stop her giggles when she saw Izuku get like this. She thought it was so cute how he could mumble on and on about quirks like this. Earth to Izuku. Toga teased and Izuku snapped out of his muttering. Oh, sorry about that, Toga. Izuku blushed slightly. Don't worry about it. Toga waved off. I think it's cute. Cute. Izuku was now full on blushing red. Toga giggled at his reaction before leaning closer with a grin. Yep. Cute. Toga confirmed. Now come on. I need to get home and take a shower. You might not sweat from the heat you can put out, but I sure do. Okay. Izuku stuttered slightly as he followed along with his friend. End of second year of junior high. Please go out with me. Izuku bowed to Toga as he held out a letter to the surprised blonde. The verdette's face was bright red as he forced himself to be braver than he usually felt when not using his quirk. Really? Toga blushed as well as she took the letter and quickly read it. It wasn't overly long, but the feelings behind the words on the paper came through powerfully. Izuku's feelings were genuine, and Toga felt her heart thump in her chest while a smile took over her face. Yes. The blonde answered her own crush's confession. She couldn't believe it. Izuku liked her like she liked him. This was the best day ever. You will? Izuku looked up and the two locked eyes without even meaning to. Both smiled at each other reflexively before Toga practically threw herself into Izuku's arms. Of course, Izuku. Toga laughed happily as they held each other. I've liked you for a long time. Izuku tightened the hold he had on Toga at her own confession. I'm glad. Toga Izuku was promptly cut off as Toga put her index finger on his lips. Himiko. Toga smiled at him. Call me Himiko, Izuku, only you get to call me that. Alright, Himiko. Izuku smiled even with his cheeks pink. We'll work on it. Toga giggled as she leaned in and placed a soft kiss on Izuku's lips. The verdette's eyes shot wide open at the sudden kiss, and he was almost certain his flames might have come out for a second. When she pulled back from the chase kiss, Toga broke out into full laughter at the stunned look on her new boyfriend's face. Hey, I wasn't expecting that. Izuku tried to defend his shocked state. You're too cute, Izuku. Toga claimed as she snuggled into his arms. I can live with that. Izuku smiled as she held her close, and the new couple enjoyed the warmth of their embrace. Izuku proved he was a bit of a romantic under his quirk nerd and hero fanboy personality after they started dating. Toga certainly didn't mind being loved and doted upon in public. Going to the mall, the movies, festivals in the summer, even out to eat at small restaurants, the two would pass well out and about. This was made easier since their parents had met already. Toga had explained her sudden control of her fits shortly after she and Izuku became friends. The Toga family and Midoriya family had gotten together for a thank you celebration not long afterwards. Her parents were so pleased that she could lead a normal life without her fits. Toga just wanted to be with Izuku, she didn't really care what was considered normal. But having her parents' approval led to less questions and more time spent with her boyfriend. Third year of junior high. You're all third years now, it's time for you to start seriously considering your futures. Their homeroom teacher told the class as he looked at them from the podium. Well, normally I would pass out these career aptitude tests, why bother? I know you all want to be heroes. The entire class, barring 3, cheered as they showed off their quirks. Yes, you all have very nice quirks, but using them at school is against the rules. So restrain yourselves. Hey, sensei, don't lump me in with all these extras. Bakugo spoke up. This lot would be lucky to end up as sidekicks to a busted D-lister. I'm the real deal. Predictably, his fellow classmates had something to say about that as they all tossed insults his way. Bring it on. I'll take you all on. You do have impressive test results. The teacher commented. Maybe you will get into UA. Cue the shocked exclamations of the rest of the class that Bakugo was trying to get into the #1 hero school. That's why UA is perfect for me. Bakugo replied as he stood up from his seat. I aced all the mock tests. I'm the only one at this school that deserves to get into UA. I'll be more popular than All Might himself and become the richest hero of all time. People all across the world will know my name. And it all starts with UA. Oh yes, Midoriya and Toga, you both applied for UA as well, right? The teacher asked, looking over his paperwork. Izuku exhaled, knowing Bakugo's temper was going to flare up. Yes, sensei. Izuku and Toga replied, and all of their classmates whispered among themselves. Toga caught her boyfriend's eye and winked at him with a grin. The look in her eyes was one of happiness and pride. Happy that they were both going to follow their chosen path as heroes, and proud at the work the two of them had put in together to get to where they were now. Deku. Bakugo yelled, his hand flaring with his explosion quirk. Or it was for about a second before the blonde's hand was caught in Izuku's, now much larger, hand. The verdette had accessed a portion of his quirk and grown a few inches, while his physique bulked up noticeably. Bakugo might as well have been a child punching an adult's palm. His small explosions didn't even make Izuku's skin turn red. The green-eyed teen was far more fire-resistant than the explosion quirk user after all. Stop being violent, Bakugo. Izuku told the ash blonde. He didn't yell or even raise his voice. But Bakugo understood the command in the other teen's voice, even while he scowled at Izuku. This was another thing Toga had helped Izuku with, standing up for himself and being more confident, even when he wasn't befueled by his quirk. Bakugo. Return to your seat immediately. We have class to start. The teacher yelled, and Bakugo scoffed angrily as he stomped back to his desk. Class continued normally for the most part after that, and the rest of the day was spent with Izuku either ignoring Bakugo's constant glares, or catching Toga's eyes, while she looked at him approvingly. His girlfriend sneaking in lustful or naughty looks throughout the day just to make him squirm. She knew what she was doing to him too. The little minx. Midoriya apartment, after school. That was so hot, Izuku. Toga cooed into his ear as she straddled her boyfriend's lap. You shut that jerk down completely. The blonde girl licked her lips as she opened his uniform jacket and ran her hands over his shirt-covered chest. Himiko, my mom is only going to be gone for a short time. Izuku worried even as his hands ran up his girlfriend's legs and settled on her hips. The two of them in his room sitting on his bed. She'll be gone for at least half an hour. Toga grinned as she pulled her uniform shirt over her head. Izuku's eyes immediately took in his girlfriend's bra-clad breasts. Toga wasn't body conscious in the slightest. She knew she was cute, and Izuku reminded her of how beautiful she was often. Her boyfriend was quite the sweet talker without even meaning to be. We should set an alarm at least. Izuku suggested even as he let Toga pull his shirt over his head. Already did. Toga giggled, showing him the active alarm on her phone before she tossed it onto his bedside table next to his phone. Their lips met as Izuku leaned back, pulling her down on top of him. They wouldn't go all the way, neither of them felt ready for that yet. But Toga would definitely make sure Izuku knew when she felt ready. But first, let me get this off. Mizuki, and she breathed out huskily as she removed her bra, letting him gaze on her B-cups. You're beautiful, Himiko. Izuku gazed at her lovingly. He had to be the luckiest guy in the world to have a girlfriend like her. I love it when you say my name like that. Toga purred as she pulled his lips to hers. The moan she let out as his warm hands began to caress her breasts would have gotten them caught if his mom had been home. The rest of the couple's third year was spent practicing with their quirks and increasing their martial skills in preparation for the UA entrance exams. Also more dates and homework sessions. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want the next part of this video, like, subscribe and comment down below, and turn on the bell notification. And also check out other videos that I have created and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.